I don't usually write shit like this, but I've been stuck in my own head about it for weeks now, and I figure if I don't dump it somewhere, I'm going to start slipping up topside. So, yeah, here it is. I'm a commercial diver. Been doing contract work for just over 12 years now, mostly salvage and infrastructure inspections in deep water. Government contracts, oil rigs, rare mineral exploration, pipeline assessments, all the usual stuff. Not military, not science, just the unglamorous end of deep-sea labor. If something breaks, we go fix it. If someone pays enough, we go look. This last job was supposed to be one of the more easy ones. We were operating off a semi-stationary vessel about 200 miles off the coast, in an area that's been getting a lot of attention lately, because of, unusual seismic readings. That's the phrase that they used in the briefings. No mention of anything, structural, no mention of anything man-made. But the pay was double my usual rate, and they were flying us out in staggered rotations, like it was some kind of a classified operation. No names on the roster, no direct client, just a subcontractor paying through another subcontractor. NDA thicker than a phone book. Never gone through anything like this in my life. I wasn't the only one weirded out by that. The rest of the dive team, 3 of us in total, had all worked together before. We called it out for what it was, a black budget job. Still, the gear was solid, the dive plan was short, and the hazard pay made it hard to care. This was a bell run from the SAT system, not a bounce dive. If you're familiar with the profession, you will be asking, why the fuck are you SAT diving for something like this, when it would be safer and cheaper using an ROV? Yeah, that's what I'd like to know too. It was one of the first things we brought up. I mean shit, they even had ROVs on board, but they never sent a single one down. 2 of us asked at separate times, and we got 2 different responses. Not exactly a good sign. When my coworker asked, they told him, ROVs had already made 2 passes, but the trench was too cluttered. Cable snags, zero-vis silt clouds, acoustic dead zones. That's why they send us in the suits. When I asked, they told me that the scans were inconclusive, that the data did not match the topography. We need a human eye on this, they said. Higher-ups want flesh and blood down there. Whatever that meant. First couple dives were uneventful. Long descents, quiet work. We were basically just scanning a trench wall and mapping anomalies. No tools, no removals. Just observation. On paper, we were looking for gas seepage zones and mineral density shifts. The only thing that bugged me early on was how quiet the comms were. Not like dead batteries, just sterile. Normally there's some banter, even minor updates, but the surface crew barely spoke unless it was a command, like they were monitoring for something, like they didn't want to talk, like a deep concentration. For a dive, we go down at 0700. Visibility is shit. Silt clouds like thick smoke, and the thermocline was punching hard that day. My suit's external cam was cutting in and out, but the internal HUD stayed green, so I kept pushing with the other diver, whom I will just call R. We reached the anomaly shelf about 800-ish feet, but it may have been slightly more than that. I can't really recall. R stopped to recalibrate his sonar. I drifted a bit further east, maybe 15 meters off of our plotted course. That is when I saw it. I thought it was a rock formation at first, or maybe a collapse from a vent. There was that same scorched look, like something had flash boiled the seafloor. But then I saw the lines, perfect arcs, angles that didn't make sense for erosion or tectonic fracture. It looked, and I know how this sounds, like part of something had been built down there. Not recent, obviously. It was buried under layers of sediment and calcified growths, and half of it had fused into the surrounding rock. But the geometry was wrong for a natural formation. There were deep, symmetrical gouges, maybe 4 feet wide, with spacing too consistent to be chance. The outer ridges had faint ridge channels, like some kind of old cable routing or fluid exchange system. It looked used, industrial. I didn't radio it in right away, just marked the coordinates and circled back toward R. He was maybe 20 meters off, but facing the opposite direction, hovering mid-water like he'd stopped moving entirely. No fitting, no arm motion, just frozen. I pinged him twice. Nothing. Then his comms lit up, but it wasn't speech. It was a low, wideband tone, like radio static, mixed with an old dial-up modem. It was loud, even with my gain turned down. Then just silence. Surface calls me immediately after that, tells me to go to the bell now. Not a suggestion, not protocol, a full recall. They didn't even wait for me to respond before they repeated the command, voice more urgent the second time. I start up. R is still just floating there. I grabbed his harness rag and tried to tow him, but he wouldn't budge, dead weight. No bubbles from his exhaust port. I told Surface he was unresponsive, and that's when they said something I will never forget. It's the only time I've ever heard something like this in my entire career. Leave him. Return to the bell. Not, what's his condition? Not, do what you can. Just leave him. So I did. I had to. R wasn't responding to bell signals either. No movement. No pressure changes in his line. There was nothing I could do on my own. I kicked back along the tether toward the last tether point and signaled the bellman. Didn't look back. Didn't want to. I have never felt good about it. They hauled me in like I'd been exposed to radiation. Full decon, full quarantine. 2-day isolation in a medbay that was way more advanced than anything we'd seen on other dive support vessels. No one explained anything, just blood draws, scans, and silence. 2 days later, they said I was clear. No mention of R, no memorial, no body. Just that he had suffered a systems failure during the operation. That was all they said. I stayed on contract for another week, mostly surface side. Didn't dive again. Notice they replaced the entire support team the day after I was released. New faces, new accents. No one spoke to me unless they had to. I still had the coordinates from that anomaly logged in my backup dive watch. I checked them once before we left the area. Satellite maps list the zone as unmapped trench sector. That's it. No bathymetric data. No sonar overlays. Nothing. It's like that whole entire section of seabed was wiped from every database. Since returning, I've tried to make sense of it. I've shown cropped screenshots to a few marine engineers I trust. Just the structure lines, nothing identifiable. They all said the same thing. Looks manufactured, but none of them could place it. Here is the part that really messes with me though. Last week, I was doing a cleanup on my rig's equipment files. I found an audio snippet I didn't remember recording. 17 seconds long, timestamped from the day of the last dive. It's R's comms. The distortion is there, but right at the end of the clip, buried under layers of noise, I swear to God, I can hear him say something. His voice is thin, like he's far away, but it's there. He just says, they're not machines. I dive, but I don't night dive. My father did though, and he came back with a story. He was swimming in the darkness and he was dimly aware of someone next to him. Not exactly unusual. There were several people in the water, but he was concerned about why their light might be off. Without that light, there was nothing to see. It's just an empty void. Before he could shine his light on this person, he became aware of the fact that his dive partner was on his other side. So either whoever was next to him was separated from their dive buddy, or it wasn't a person at all. The need to know caused him to shine his light tentatively at the shape, revealing a massive barracuda, keeping pace with him. Rightfully surprised, he moved back a bit, but the creature just kept near him. Dredging up some boldness, he moved towards it, and it moved away from him, always keeping that comfortable distance between them. After a moment, my father continued on, trying to put the thought of the predator out of his mind as it continued to shadow him. It didn't take long for the beam of his flashlight to illuminate a fish, and then, in an explosion of speed and bubbles, the barracuda shot out of the darkness and intercepted the fish, retreating back into the inky waters, only to return to my father's side a few heartbeats later. This kept up for as long as the dive did. The barracuda stayed close, using my father's light for hunting. When at last the time came to return to the boat, the barracuda remained by his side until they reached the craft, then spun in the darkness and dove away. Not me, but an acquaintance who used to be an industrial diver. There was a ferry accident in the Philippines, and it turned out that the Del Monte Company was illegally using the ferry to ship massive barrels of a banned pesticide to some of their plantations there. Thus, it had the potential to be a toxic disaster with those barrels of poison trapped in there, and they could not recover the bodies of the dead until the pesticides were removed. My friend's company in the US was hired to retrieve the barrels, with the corpses still underwater in the ferry. By this point, the bodies had floated to the top of the upside-down hull, and their hair was hanging down, swaying in the currents. The divers did successfully remove the hazard, after which the bodies could finally be removed. However, the event caused my friend so much trauma that he left the field altogether and now works on land. Can you just imagine? I was diving in a local pond with a group of much more advanced divers than me. They were cave divers. I was just in advanced certification at the time. I am leading the dive as to get used to pressures and responsibilities of heading the procession. They are mentoring me. It is a Texas puddle, visibility 10 feet max, not too deep, maybe 25 feet. The known horrible visibility makes it impossible to navigate by compass. We follow a line, string, put by other divers. These lines go from one sunken item to another. So, I know I'm about to hit a small sunken boat, don't remember which one. There are a few similar in a row in the same state of decay. So, I am first in the group. I get to the boat and see someone's black army boot sticking out of the inner quarters. Curious thing is, it looks somewhat new, not like items you find on the bottom. Hard to see, too much muck in the water. So, I touch my boot, thinking it is by itself, but it won't lift, like it is attached to something heavy. I put my hand further in and feel the leg continuing out. Pans, the calf, and I see the second leg now. Fuck with a big letter F, right? I turn around and show a sign for emergency ascent to the group behind me. Everyone has a sour face. No one wants to surface, but it is a rule that if one stays up, others in the group must abort, no questions. They wanted me to explain with signs why, but what is a diver's sign for a cadaver? I feel like I rush toward the surface, even though trying to stay calm and take time. So, we are on the lake surface. I have this adrenaline rush, can't breathe enough. So, I tell them there is a body down there. I see rolling eyes from everyone once they see I am serious. A fun bunch, right? So, I describe in detail what I saw. We go down. I don't lead anymore. We make a group search pattern for the line, but once we locate it, we don't know if we should go forward or backwards, as there are a number of boats on the line, and who knows in which the body is in, and how far we drifted while talking it out on the surface. Well, we find all boats before finding the original one, of course. So, our customary leader goes into the cabin of the boat, and we wait. I'd say he was rather courageous at this point, went right in. Then he emerges from the cloud of muck and tells us all to surface. So, gluing information together from what we learn later on, turns out the police, or some other agency, had a body recovery training in the same lake the same day. When they went for lunch, they stuffed their fully dressed anatomically correct rubber doll in one of the sunken boats for a few hours for safekeeping. Well, I died a little that day. Sulpicia Lines, the owner of Princess of the Stars, said it did not know it was carrying 400 boxes of endosulfan, a pesticide bound for a pineapple plantation in the south of the country. We were not aware of any pesticide on board, said Ryan Go, a company executive. Hundreds of corpses are believed trapped in the 7-story Princess of the Stars, which ran aground and flipped over with 865 passengers and crew on board during Typhoon Fengsheng on Saturday. We recalled the divers for the moment. They will wait for advice from Manila on what to do next, said Elena Batista, the head of a task force dealing with the aftermath of the disaster. We have a copy of the storage plan, so we know the exact location of the 40-foot container containing 400 boxes of endosulfan, each with 45 kilograms each, so this is what we are looking for. He said experts would check the condition of the vessel and recommend how best to remove the chemical. The ferry sinking is likely to be the Philippines' worst sea accident since the Dana Paz ferry collided with an oil tanker in 1987, killing more than 4,000 people. Sulpicia Lines, which owns the Princess of the Stars, also own the Dana Paz. So far, only 56 survivors have been found, either plucked from the water by fishermen or washed up on surrounding islands. US and Philippine divers have so far only removed about a dozen bodies. The operation is painstaking due to narrow corridors, floating debris, darkness, and the ship's precarious position. The overall death toll from Typhoon Fengsheng could top 1,300, including over 500 people killed in a torrent of flooding that tore up trees and bridges, destroyed homes, and forced over 2 million people to evacuate. One of my first experiences, cave scuba diving. I decided to go dive the cave with my buddy, since we'd done it earlier that day when conditions were great. We didn't lay a line either, huge no-no, because there was a pipe along the floor of the cave, which we saw on our previous trip. We assumed this pipe began at the entrance and went straight back into the end of the cave. The owners installed it as a water vacuum to help clean the deepest parts of this cave. This day, there had been a high volume of students diving the cavern, the large, open, beginning portion of the cave, which had churned up the silt till you could barely see. This is crucial, because the cavern portion is where you just swim towards sunlight on a normal dive. To add to our fuck-up, we dove in the evening, not realizing that the sun would have set when we were heading out. We began the dive confidently, trusting our misguided failsafes, and swam to the cavern. Both of us noticed how silty it was, but figured, hey, you can still see the surface, thanks to the sun, and continue towards the cave. Once inside, we swam down to the end of the cave, about 200 feet back, turned around, and began to exit. The closer we got to the exit, the worse the visibility got, and by the time we noticed the light at the end of the tunnel wasn't coming, the visibility was barely 2 feet in front of us. Undeterred, we grabbed onto the pipe and followed, hand over hand, to where we assumed the pipe would breach the surface, crawling along foot by foot, holding onto a PVC pipe on the floor. There was the point we hit a wall, literally. This pipe, which we had assumed led to the surface, instead made a bend to a shallower passage of the cave where it entered the ceiling and disappeared. In the terrible visibility, we followed it into a passage we'd never seen before, in a part of the cave that was a complete dead end. I will never forget the feeling of dread and panic that hit me, but the most memorable moment was making eye contact with my buddy as we both realized we were going to die. Most accidental deaths are instantaneous, but in cave diving, you have the time to contemplate your fate as you watch your air pressure needle drop, and as panic started to set in, my air needle started moving towards zero. So we fought. Survival instinct set in. We refused to wait and drown, and instead started crawling, in near zero viz, over every part of the cave to find the exit. If you watch the video below, you will notice there is a sign at the entrance warning people of the dangers of cave diving. It is ironic, but this sign saved our lives, as it is oriented to face the entrance, a fact my buddy remembered and gave us a point to try and blindly shoot toward the pitch black surface. No surprise, it worked. We lived, and 1 month later, I got back on the horse, got cave certified, got called a lucky idiot by my cave instructor, and learned to never make the same mistake twice. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. Rescue diver in the Bahamas, diving in a submerged blue hole. The entrance is below sea level, and a diver went missing. After an hour or two of searching, went back into the blue hole to see if there were any signs of him. Saw the glint of his watch and his arm sticking out near the bottom. Start descending down to the bottom to recover the body. On the way down, realized that the bottom was a school of sharks that must have been there for breeding. So many sharks that they blocked the view of the actual bottom. Descended into the darkness, grabbed his arm, couldn't stand to look at the body, and started ascending. The sharks followed, and they were circling the both of us. Had to take a break at a halfway at around 65 feet so as to not get the bends. Scared shitless. The entire time waiting to normalize scared shitless. Turns out he was struck by a passing boat. Saved someone from drowning while scuba diving. Person had an epileptic seizure at 85 feet of water in a pitch black cavern that I was diving in also. I was hovering above, just watching the flashlights move about, when I noticed one flashlight not moving. I swam down, and was met with the other diver with no regulator in their mouth, eyes open, and just on their knees. The diver's buddy was next to them, in incomplete shock as to what was going on, and was not assisting whatsoever. 15 years of diving and instructor training came over me like it was second nature. I thought her regulator just came out, so I popped mine and offered it to her. That is when I noticed she had done mentally checked out. I popped my number 2 regulator in her mouth and attempted to put my number 1 regulator in her mouth, but her teeth were completely clenched. I then pressed the purge button to get air into her mouth, and noticed her cheeks moving, so I know air was getting in there. That was good enough for me. I then grabbed her under her arm and get the regulator flowing in her mouth, and swam to the opening of the cavern, and then up over 60 feet to get her to the surface. Once I was on the surface, did everything I was trained to do. Inflate BC, dumped her weights, get her on her back, and started towing to land. As I'm towing her in, she is regurgitating all of the water she swallowed and inhaled. It seemed like gallons of water. Got her to land where other divers assisted me in getting all of her gear off. She was breathing fine and alive, but in shock for a while, and slowly came around like nothing happened. We were very lucky that we were only 10 minutes into the dive, or for sure we would have both been bent and spending time in a hyperbaric chamber. The crazy thing is, she didn't tell anyone she had epilepsy, and when we later reviewed her consent form, she checked off no to epilepsy. I put myself at risk shooting up to the surface like that, but if I came across that situation again, I would not hesitate to save someone's life. This was in my surf club days. One of the greatest moments of my surf club life was when I got my PADI dive ticket so I could do diving for the Coast Guard who were in the neighboring building. And this was a great moment because it gave me and my immediate family access to the Coast Guard / surf club bar. I was popular that year all of a sudden. So there I am, bitterly complaining to no one because they are all drinking at the surf club about the aforementioned damn ex-girlfriend when my lounges lit up with blue and red lights. A policeman had driven down the driveway and parked outside and decided that knocking was too hard, so turned on the lights. My father was sitting in the front of the car laughing at my face when the officer told me to get in the car. There had been a boat accident. 3 guys had taken a boat out and managed to sink it. One had made it to shore and raised the alarm, but he didn't know where his friends were. The commotion had spilled into the bar at the surf club, and it was realized quickly that the on-call diver had been drinking for a few hours. The time is 7 p.m. at this stage. Enter my father. My son is the diver for the surf club. He is at home, probably complaining about his damn ex-girlfriend. I am guessing anyway. With that, I was conscripted. I was on the Coast Guard boat with all my kit and getting the rundown. 22-foot boat, stuck anchor, mildly choppy sea, Tanner's Rock, 2 missing. Tanner's Rock was a popular fishing spot, a large rock formation about 30 meters deep that fish tended to rather near. I assume they had a great bar or nightclub or something. I don't really know what attracts fish to stuff. I am suited up and game face is on. It's now close to 8 p.m. I am about to roll backwards into the sea when the skipper says, "Well, I don't see any sharks. Good luck." That bastard. Over I go. They had dropped a rope with a sandbag attached when we got to Tanner's Rock, so I could guide myself down. I grab the rope and start descending. The dark closes in. The lights on my helmet and wrist penetrates far less than you would think, and less than I hoped. You can't really crash dive 40 meters, or you will get knocked pretty hard, and you can't crash surface from 40 meters, or you will get the bends. So, slowly does it. But there is no sound, and it's a close dark bubble with swaying edges, so you need to make your mind pay attention to anything other than shapes in the fucking water, because you will see them. There are sharks and squids and octopus and demons and witches, all just outside of your line of vision. It is so dark you can't see the surface at all. No stars, no moon. Is that a shark? No, it's fine. Bump. The knots on the rope are 10 meters apart. 3 more to go. Bump. The dark seems to be getting closer somehow. Bump. Nearly there. The bag has stirred up the bottom a bit, and there is less visibility. I didn't see the bottom at first, because the back of the boat came out of the dark at me. It was nose down, stern up, standing at about 45 degrees from the bottom. This was the moment I realized there could be 2 bodies on that boat. The lights now had something to bounce off of, so I could see a little more than before, and I started to check the boat. The cabin door was closed, so I knocked. I have no idea what would have happened if they had knocked back, but there was nothing. I had to gently, but violently, rip the door off and repeat the process for the onboard toilet room, but that was thankfully empty too. I grabbed the EPIR beacon, which was in a plastic bag, meaning it didn't go off, idiots, and had a look at the front of the boat. The anchor had gotten stuck, and the winch was strong enough to pull the front of the boat down. I think the finding was that a wave came over the front and flooded the front section of the boat. and then the winch took over and happily wound the boat to the anchor, then jammed up on the chain and just stopped. I undid the bolt on the anchor, and the boat started to slowly rise. I tied the sandbag rope to the bollard on the front and started the long ascent back into the dark. I started thinking about the two missing men, floating around, drowned, just beyond my sight in the dark, imagining hands reaching out for me, sharks eating them, and looking for more humans. Bump. Check my watch. I have to go slow enough that I do 1 minute per bump. I could do 2, but better safe than sorry. Let me tell you, that is a long-ass minute. Up we go again. Bump again. Timer again. This is easy. You have done this before. Start rising again. Bump. I am about 10 meters down. I have heaps of air and an overactive imagination when it all goes to fuck. Beneath me, I can see movement. Fast movement. One hand points the light at it, while the other hand goes for my diver knife. A huge solid object is just below my feet. It hits and slides up my leg, and I realize in horror it's the fucking boat. The boat has risen, and the pontoons are expanding as the gas expands, displacing more water and accelerating the ascent. The boat goes past in a few seconds, and in my relief, I actually laugh. I resheath the knife, and then I realize my mistake. The rope is gone. That damn whore boat has stolen my rope. So, I do what my training tells me to do, and I piss myself. I look at the watch, and it's been a minute. I start to rise with no reference points and no guide. After what feels like a year, I surface to the yells and abuse from the Coast Guard, trying to figure out what to do with the capsized, but now floating boat. I swim over and get back on the boat. We managed to flip the boat. Royal way, I didn't do shit, and tow it back to shore. I had to debrief with the police and went to see my dad, now wearing the wetsuit, half undone and bare feet. I get a Viking hero's welcome, beer and cheering, and much storytelling was at hand. Turns out, all 3 of the boat people got to shore. 2 were close to each other and went home and got drunker, while the 3rd raised the alarm. I've been at sea for most of my life, over 25 years paid to be there. I've seen some strange things, but mostly natural phenomena. Top 5 would be, number 1, meteor shower close enough to observe visually and by radar, seen from a fishing trawler in UK waters in the late 90s. It was incredible, and like something from a disaster movie. They all burnt up in the atmosphere, burning green trails. 2, another single meteor observed in the Pacific Ocean between Galapagos and Tahiti. This would have been around 2014. It was nighttime, and there was no other ships around us. This was a green fireball with a trail of smoke that seemed so close I was expecting there to be a crash and a wave, but nothing followed it disappearing over the horizon. I could smell the burning when I went to the bridge wing. 3, bioluminescence, experienced on many occasions, but the greatest was in the Gulf of Aden, when dolphins were chasing the bow wave at night, and they were made visible by the glowing bioluminescence in the water. It was like a spectacular light show. Number 4, Bahamas, tongue of the ocean. I was on a dive research vessel and happened to look up when a large animal broke the surface, breached, and made a huge splash. It was likely a whale, but because of the distance it was hard to tell. I have seen hundreds of whale breaches, and something about this one did not seem to match the shape of a whale. It was jet black and huge, likely over 40-foot length. Splash was huge. I told everyone in the boat, and we looked out for a second breach, but none came. Number 5, Gulf of Aden, heading west back to the Mediterranean. Thick fog, and following the international recommended transit corridor, recommended for vessels to avoid piracy in the area. We were at safe speed, 6 knots, and monitoring radar. At 12 miles range, 2 targets appeared tracking south or north on a collision course with my vessel. CPA 0, which means collision. Initially, they were doing 12 knots, but speed increased to 40 knots. They were on an intercept course, and we were in pirate waters. The visibility was less than 3 miles, so we called into our armed security detail, and they came to the bridge to monitor the radars. These were 2 clearly defined targets, and the radar system's ARPA was tracking them without difficulty. No signs of the common spurious echoes or false targets often experienced with S and X band marine radars. It was quite tense on the bridge, as we thought this could be 2 fast pirate skiffs approaching. The 2 targets tracked half a mile ahead and increased speed to 60 knots. The strange thing was that we saw nothing. I suspected helicopters, but there was no sound. The radar continued to track them until they went out of our radar range. Very odd experience.